That's my baby girl right there. Ooh, she with her friends. I'm a dog, I ain't shit. I'ma wind up hitting her friends. Bad guy, outlaw. Ooh, I'm like Pac, but I ain't die after the second time I got shot.
What's good? This is your boy Tico Tren, aka Dark Skin Tico. And today's video is going to be about today's live stream or podcast is going to be about coping and truth for all intents and purposes. Because I always hear this stuff from people when they talk about coping and this is the truth and stuff like that. And the sad part about that is at the end of the day, I think at the end of the day that it's not the fact that, people are coping, it's the fact that everyone copes for all intents and purposes. Every single person copes in the face of this earth with various things, to certain things to various degrees. Let it be depression, let it be suicide, let it be alcoholism, let it be drugs, let it be, feeling lonely, feeling, any of these types of things for all intents and purposes. That's the problem with the society today, is everybody actually suffers from coping to some extent. Now, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, when you practice something or do something or follow a line of reasoning, when you boil it down to its basis, you're doing nothing more than coping at the end of the day. And the funny thing about that is I've always gotten people who always will come in and then try to make it sound as if, me preaching the red pill is me coping when in fact it's nothing, it's far from the truth. The sad part about coping is usually when somebody's actually coping, they tend to project their coping onto other people, is typically how it works. The sad part about that is it's nothing more than a continuous practice of, not focusing on yourself and not, doing things to make yourself a better version of yourself, or not doing things properly to make it so that everything will be okay within yourself. The cold reality is, at the end of the day, everybody goes through coping. A good example is like, because I always get people that will come on my channel and go, well, Tico, Tren, red pill is cope. Well, no, it's not. Red pill's reality. Red pill is truth. Red pill is a vast sea of things for all intents and purposes. And the same thing goes for what Billy the Goat said. What's up, Billy the Goat? About digging into his tub of ice cream. That's actually a coping mechanism that typically a lot of women actually practice a lot, especially when they go through a breakup or something like that. Another coping mechanism that women do is justify cheating at a girl's night out on their significant other. It's not the fact because it was Chad or Brad. It's just the fact that they go on feelings. And the sad part about that is people try to conflate feelings with looks when in fact it's all about emotion and how you make the person feel at the time. Like a good example of that was the story I told about the wedding that I went to. We hated each other's guts, but the fact that we hated each other's guts and there was so much friction created a sexual tension between us, and we end up having sex at our own wedding. That's typically how a lot of this shit actually works. What's up, Gruta Ghost? And the sad part about that is once you understand how this stuff actually works and women actually work, you understand better on how to get around a lot of the shit that everybody always talks about. And everybody always talks about, like, yeah, that's another good one. Eating chocolate is another good coping mechanism that women deal with for all intents and purposes. The irony to it is at the end of the day, once it's all boiled down to nothing, everything you do in life, every decision you make in life is nothing more than a coping mechanism to actually protect you from having to deal with yourself, having to face yourself or face your darkest fears within yourself. That's pretty much all it really is. The sad part about that is what a lot of people don't seem to understand or get is when they actually do this stuff, you're creating a bigger quagmire within yourself by not facing this stuff. So when you go to deal with it, it's even bigger monster. You're even bigger monster within than you're willing to deal with at the time that you should have dealt with it for all intents and purposes. Nobody ever wants to deal with, you know, their own demons or face themselves. But the sad part about that, the more you don't, and the more you retract yourself from dealing with yourself, the bigger the monster becomes within you. The sad part about that is it's all about accepting the monster within you and dealing with yourself and facing yourself, which makes you a stronger human being above all. A lot of people can't do this because it requires you to dive within yourself and face yourself. And that's work. That's work that people don't want to do, typically. The sad part about that is when you avoid dealing with yourself, that's nothing more than a coping mechanism. When you start projecting onto other people, that's nothing more than another coping mechanism. When you start trying to become a part of a group of people because they feel a certain way like you feel a certain way, you're doing nothing more than coping at the end of the day. And people will say, well, Tico, you're red pill, you're coping. No, the reason why I'm red pill is because I'm in a relationship. That's typically how that works. I've talked about this multiple times in my videos. If I wasn't in a relationship, I would be MGTOW. However, I'm in a relationship, I'm red pill. Now, to actually put this in a context for coping, coping would be if me, Tico, Tren, called myself MGTOW while I was in a whole ass relationship with a woman. That would be coping. That would be coping far beyond coping for all intents and purposes. Also betrayal, but it would be coping. That's typically how this actually works. And the sad part about that is at the end of the day, if you can't follow the core tenets, why call yourself something that you're not? So coping in a way is a nice way to brush off your insecurities and ignore the core tenets to actually make yourself fit in or fall on alley cart type mentality when it comes to that type of thing. Excessive eating is also a coping mechanism. Um, a good example of excessive eating being a coping mechanism would be smokers. Once you stop smoking, because you're so used to the putting things in your mouth, you typically pick up eating in exchange for that. And it's the cold reality. You have to learn how to do your life all over again without smoking, and the constant putting something in your mouth. Um, some of the best things are sometimes don't end well, but typically a lot of smokers tend to chew on pens instead of eating stuff, or carrot sticks typically work in place of cigarettes or other foods because it's a lot better for you to actually take on and a lot more healthier. You're not taking on but like potato chips and things like that, whereas you're taking on carrot sticks, which are much more healthier for you, and celery sticks. Um, another aspect of coping is the fat shaming. If you fat shame somebody, you're wrong, which is actually a coping mechanism for somebody who is not happy with themselves. So if there's a such thing as fat shaming, then that means you're coping with your problem. You're actually not happy with yourself. So if because at the end of the day, if you're actually happy with yourself, there would not be no such thing as the term fat shaming. This is typically what I talk about when I talk about the big and beautiful, or the what's it called, the fat acceptance group. They basically, because the word fat shaming actually exists, that lets you know how they actually feel about themselves deep down inside. The sad part about that is instead of actually accepting that they are and actually projecting that they get sad and upset. So they start eating and making themselves bigger for all intents and purposes. Or that's the way they basically cope with actually dealing with the fat acceptance program, when in fact they're not willing to accept themselves and they want everybody to accept them around them. The sad part about that is there's not as much there's not enough acceptance around you that'll actually make you believe that you actually feel the way you do about yourself, because you need everybody else around you to make you feel good about how you feel. Or you need people to make rules to make you feel good about how you feel, or to squash people or naysayers for how you feel. And that's typically how this stuff works when it comes to coping and truth. The sad part about that is at the end of the day, I can make anything truth. Hell, I can argue the wage gap as truth if I really wanted to. Hell, if you actually go about it the right way and you use equality of outcome, you can actually argue the wage gap properly. That's just factual. Or if you take the best way to argue is one of the ones that the feminists use quite often is they'll take every single worker and they'll throw them into a pool together and they'll say, well, men, obviously there's a pay gap here. It's typically how it works. Now, if you look at it from LSAT and you don't really do any investigating and you just look at it for the context that's actually there and not doing any further investigation, you find out that you'll think to yourself, yeah, that's actually true. Pay gap. Pay gap. The sad part about that, once you do further investigation, you find out that they took men who work full time and men who did triple double overtime and they put them all in one category and they compared to women who were working part time and full time. And they say wage gap. You see what I'm saying? So, in all technicality, if you're not going to look at it if you're not going to dive deep into it, what happens is how it actually boils down to is the fact of the matter is you looking at something a certain way doesn't make it true. Just because you want to believe it's truth, that don't make it truth. Hell, some of the most horrific things happen because people thought it was the truth. Spanish Inquisition, um, the Black Plague, things like that. All because people believed that they were just and pure. Shit just spread all over the place and killed off damn near half a population. Well, more than half a population at that point. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, just because you speak it, it doesn't actually make it true. Just because you say it doesn't make it true. Just because you use quotes, pseudoscience, and already tried and tested things doesn't make it true. Because the sad part about that is those already tried and tested things were actually here before you came along. People have been practicing that for a while. Before black pill was a thing, I was already getting a haircut and getting my shape up. It is what it is. The sad part about that, you can't sit up here and tell me now, after many, many years, getting a haircut is looks maxing. No, people get haircuts on a regular basis. People have been getting haircuts since the beginning of time, before looks maxing was even a thing. That's typically how that works. So it doesn't make black pill any more truer if you're going to try to bring up the looks maxing thing, when in fact, at the end of the day, only one or two of the things on that list is actually a true statement. Haircuts, yeah, it works for you. You get a haircut, what happens is you feel good about yourself. Your confidence goes up. The same thing goes for clothing. If you pick the right clothing, or you start wearing a suit, or you start wearing a shirt and tie, you feel good about yourself. That's the cold reality. And the sad part about that, it's all about how you can make yourself feel better about yourself, or bring up your confidence. Because at the end of the day, none of that stuff is looks maxing. It's confidence maxing at the end of the day. So what you're actually doing is trying to call it confidence max. I mean, you're trying to call something that's confidence maxing looks maxing. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're confident enough, it'll show. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you're basically building your confidence. You're not building your look. At the end of the day. So when you actually look at it from a bigger standpoint or a or in a bigger light, you tend to realize very quickly that you're doing nothing more than boosting your confidence while you're denying all the what all the PUAs are actually saying. You turn around and use a lot of the stuff that the PUAs actually preach by looks maxing. I mean, looks maxing, it's not really looks maxing, it's just PUAs basically teaching you how to better yourself and pick up women. That's all it really is. But the sad part about that is the black pill community would say that the PUAs are coping when in fact they're using the same damn tactics to try to improve their looks. How is that coping? That's actually accepting. You're actually coping by saying that they're doing wrong when in fact you're actually stealing their very ideas that make them who they are in the manosphere. The PUA has actually been saying this for a while. Hell, I've been saying get a haircut and get some nice clothes for a while. I've been doing this for 14 years. So it's one of those things where you have to understand how to actually do things and go about getting things. Just because you look bad, that don't make it so. Like I said, the funny thing about that, the most successful relationships in this world come from people who got turned down the first time and handled it so well that it impressed the woman. So the second time around, the woman actually approached the man to actually date the man. It is what it is. Because the sad part about getting turned down, it's all about how you handle being turned down. Because the sad part about that, I know many men who've been turned down by a woman. Then days, weeks later, a month later, she's talking to this man again, and they're in a relationship. Next thing you know it. That's typically how this stuff actually works. It's all about how you handle being denied or rejected for all intents and purposes. If you act like a wounded dog, you'll be treated like a wounded dog. If you act like, over too overconfident or too over cocky, it'll be seen as weakness or you overcompensating for something that she did. So she won't see anything in you. And it's one of those things where it's like, you got to be nonchalant about it if you're going to get turned down. Okay. All right. Have a good one. And just walk off. Or, you just got to be nonchalant about it and for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is once you actually understand this concept of, personal interactions, you'll understand how stuff actually works and the dynamic actually works. And the sad part about that is I always talk about illiterotica. The illiterotica is a nice way to manipulate and or bend a situation to your need for all intents and purposes, or bend a situation to make it so that it works for you. I always say the best game spitters are the one that can get themselves not to just get girls, but can get themselves out of everything and anything in any aspect of their life. The sad part about that is typically a lot of the people who speak game, they only speak game to women or use game to women. The sad part about that, using game is a nice way to get yourselves out of tickets, trouble, firing, anything else under the sun. If you're very good at using game, you'll be good enough to actually talk your supervisor down from a ledge from firing your ass. Or you'll be good enough to actually keep people from seeing you in a certain light based on society. Like if you're black, if you have enough game, you can actually make those white people comfortable with your presence. If you have enough game, that is. Another good example that if you're Arab, and the whole entire view on Arabs, if you have game, you can actually change somebody's view and outlook on you by using game to bolster your image in a positive light. This is typically what a lot of people miss when it comes to game. By using this game, not just for spitting game to women, but being able to use that game to game yourself out of troubles and woes and anything in the system. You've created a bigger platform for everything. What's up? What's up, Elder Monk? What's up, Billy the Goat? What's up, Shinobi One? The sad part about that is once you boil all that down and you take into consideration, what's up, Barry Yam? All the stuff that's going on around you. If you're able to game everything around you, you can change the whole entire system around you by manipulating the system with game. Game is not just for women. Game is for everything, every aspect of your life. Let it be, negotiations. Let it be getting yourself out of a speeding ticket with a cop. Let it be talking a judge down from throwing a book at you. Let it be getting the prosecutor to change their mind about throwing the book at you, to getting your defense lawyer to believe enough in you to be able to defend you in court without fail or hesitation. Or if you get caught by the police, merely use game to get yourself out of trouble by the police. And, like, I wasn't their officer. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I know all black people fit the description and all, but, stuff like that. You can actually as long as you can actually manipulate the world around you, you'll be perfectly fine. And the sad part about that is this is typically the peak of your game when you can actually pull all this stuff off, when you can go in and negotiate things, when you can talk people down from a high ass price at a car dealership or anything else like that, when you can actually negotiate yourself into a position that you know damn well you don't even fucking deserve. That's when you know you got game. When you can do things to control your environment and things around you, to make it so your environment fits you instead of you fit it. That's game. And the sad part about that is game isn't coping. Game is manipulating everything around you. Because at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is you're here to grab life by the horns. So you're basically bettering your chances to be able to grab life by the horns and successfully hold on to the horns of life. That's not what coping is. Coping is when you take and you put yourself in a certain box and call yourself a certain thing, all because you're not willing to try or you're not willing to do everything. The sad part about that is it's funny how the emo black pillars talk about, everybody else is coping. When you tell them to better themselves, they just merely scoff at you and laugh. And then you go over in their little community and you find out that they're using the same thing that pickup artists use for, before the prep work for what pickup artists use to get you ready to go out for day game or night game, basically, or cold approach. And it is what it is. At the end of the day, it comes down to your willingness to accept the fact that you have to kind of sort of approve yourself to a certain extent. The problem with looks maxing, though, is the whole entire lineup of stuff within looks maxing really doesn't work out too well for men. Because the sad part about that is you not finna go out there and get no damn makeup and, making yourself look better for women is typically where you go wrong at. That's actually not black pill. Make yourself look good for women. That's typically just trying to improve yourself for women and improve your chances of actually getting a woman. And this is what I always talk about when it comes to black pill. Black pill is about accepting and transcending everything and the ability to give up everything in anyone at the drop of a dime or the drop of a hat without even a second thought. That's the cold reality in today, because a lot of people always want to make it sound like they're on some new hip thing when they're really not. They're basically following a trend or taking and making somebody else's tips and tricks their own. Because the sad part about that is it's actually very true. It's all about making something else your own, somebody else's concepts your own. Good example of that is when they talk about mewing. Mewing only works when you're mewing only works when you're when you're at your worst. That's about it. When you're average or medium, it typically doesn't work for you. Mewing doesn't work for you in the least bit when you're average. After a while, you have to go get surgery done to actually make yourself look better. It's true, it's sad, it hurts, but that's what you basically have to do because after a while, now you're just trying to fight genetics when you mute. It is what it is. Another good example of that is, yeah, we're just going to stick with mewing for right now because typically everybody believes by mewing and doing the stuff that you do, you can actually make your jaw protrude better. When in fact, no, you can't. It only works for people who are, it only works for people who are in worse off. The sad part about that is once you boil it down, if you're not worse off, you that requires you to actually go get plastic surgery done to complete what you need done to yourself. That's typically how a lot of this stuff actually works. At the end of the day, it's not even the fact that, you talk about all this stuff like it's great and it's like brand new stuff. Trust me, we've all been getting our haircuts since day one. We've all been doing the dressing up thing since day one. We've all been doing the manscaping. A lot of men, even though they never wanted to admit it, always do manscaping. Been doing manscaping since day one, but a lot of men won't ever admit to that type of stuff. I mean, I seem to remember a long time ago that this whole entire looks maxing actually is nothing more than what they used to refer to it, um, Ryan Seacrest guy, metrosexual. So in all technicality, this looks maxing actually stems from being metrosexual for all intents and purposes. So basically, you're trying to go for a metrosexual look. The irony to it is Ryan Seacrest actually got surgery done too. This is typically why he's where he is today. Also, Ryan Seacrest isn't that tall either, which is actually pretty funny. Um, yeah, Ryan Seacrest isn't that tall either, but he still gets women. He's only 5'7". Um, so that whole entire looks, or height goes out the window when you find out your favorite guy got surgery done to his jaw and cheeks and shit like that. And the sad part about that, after a while, you literally have to go get the surgery done if you want to maximize your look. I know everybody talk about, ooh, I don't want to get that done. Well, sometimes you do. If that's how you strongly feel about yourself, instead of actually coping, do and change the fact that you don't have to cope anymore with the fact that you got your new look now and you're no longer coping anymore. That's typically how it works. All the best looking people in the world, I would say about 98% of the best looking people in the world have gotten surgery done to themselves to make themselves look like the best looking people in the world. Sad part about that, there's about 1% of people in the world who actually have this natural look like that. Um, when it comes to men, when it comes to women, all women across the board, pretty much, unless they got a fat face or anything like that, that sort of blocks their features. Typically, all women have this feature across the board. Because the sad part about that, to be honest with you, the metrosexual look actually is the one who actually put this whole entire look on Front Street, if you know what I mean. this whole entire looks maxing on Front Street. Um, Along with play things like shows like Queer Eye for the Straight Guy that actually put looks maxing on the map before it was even looks maxing. So basically, they would take and they would go dress up a guy. Gay guys would basically go change a straight guy's environment, changes the way he dress, the way his living room, his household looks and stuff like that. Uh, Show him different things like cooking and arts and stuff like that, and stuff like that. So typically, what that is basically making yourself more marketable. Is all it really is. That's the cold hard reality. Queer Eye for the Straight Guy was basically making mediocre men or not so attractive men more marketable. That's pretty much all it really was. That's actually I don't know if that show comes on anymore, but apparently it was very popular back in the day during that whole entire metrosexual trending thing. But yeah, you typically learn a lot from people around you. This is typically why women keep gay guys around them, so they can basically have the scoop on men because they know that their girlfriends are full of shit and they can't give them the proper information they need to get a man for all intents and purposes. So they keep a gay guy around just for this purpose. So I say that all men, no matter how you feel about them, I'm not saying you date them. I'm just saying have a gay guy around if you want to, do better looks maxing. Trust me, they're not going to make you look gay. They'll basically help you bolster your dress and how you dress and how you carry yourself because they'll tell you the honest to God truth about yourself. Unlike women, will lie to your face and tell you look handsome or you look great, or they'll blow smoke up your ass. Whereas gay guys typically don't. They'll tell you look a hot mess if you're a hot mess. Um, that's pretty much it on that concept when it comes to that. Um, at the end of the day, like I was saying, just because something sounds like truth, that don't necessarily make it truth. Once you actually start putting the puzzle pieces together, you realize that a lot of the stuff that these people are preaching actually belongs to various other groups in the manosphere, and they basically brought it all to one thing, and it makes it sound like it's way cooler because it's been preached before and it's been said before. The only thing not there is the whole entire. The only thing not there is pretty much the whole entire the goidial thing. The sad part about that, that's a new thing. That's a more of a new phenomenon. Because the sad part about that is if you actually go outside and look at every single couple that walk by you. Matter of fact, I implore people to go outside and look at all the couples coming out of restaurants, all the couples walking around holding hands, and tell me the percentage of people who look like the people that emo black pillars say they're supposed to look like, and the percentage of people who don't, basically. You'll find out very quickly that a lot of the people out there look nothing like what the emo black pillars say how you should look to get a girl, when in fact, that's not how this works. And then they'll say, if you have status, then you'll be able to get a girl. There's a lot of guys out there, and we know a shit ton of guys who are literally dating a woman who is working and they're sitting at home on their ass while he's driving her car, playing PlayStation, and is late to pick her up for work. I know a lot of guys that do that shit. Matter of fact, I know more guys who do that shit who are in relationships than guys out there who claim that they're slaying it in the field, basically. It's just facts. And the cold hard reality about it is if you're not willing to accept the truth, you're willing to bend or convolute the truth to make it fit you or make it sound like you're telling the truth. A good example of that, like I said, if you look at the gender pay gap, you can actually make it sound like it's actually something that's real if you don't do any further investigation. Matter of fact, I can actually argue the gender pay gap without actually using statistics. I mean, while using statistics, and then on top of that, not using equality of outcome. I could actually use equality of opportunity and actually argue that men actually make more than women. Now, the sad part about that, disclaimer, I'm not actually saying men make more than women. But what I'm actually saying is, if you were to take a good example of that is, and I don't mean to throw this group of people under the bus, but I've already used them already as an example for advice and dress, basically. If you take gay people, gay men, gay men on average make more than hetero couples. They also make more than lesbian couples. So if you're going to actually argue pay gap, you would have to throw gay people under the bus to do so. That's the only way that you can argue pay gap properly and actually get away with it. However, throwing gay people under the bus in this day and age, not the best thing in the world to do, especially for your career. That is the only way you can actually argue wage gap and actually make it work. That is the only way. And the sad part about that is, to successfully do that, you would literally have to basically throw gay people under the bus to do so. You would have to literally do that. That's the only way you can actually pull that off to actually make it work. That's the cold reality. Because at the end of the day, a gay couple actually makes more than a hetero couple. And a hetero couple actually makes more than a lesbian couple. It's the nature of the beast. And it's typically how it works. So it's one of those things where you have to understand the whole entire dynamic behind it and society behind it to actually argue a certain point a certain way. Now, somebody can debunk the fact that, the pay gap between, you know, gay guys and heterosexuals, they really wanted to. But at the end of the day, it's the best basis for actually arguing an actual pay gap for all intents and purposes. All this other stuff where you take a bunch of people and put them all in one room, put them all in a one big box basically, and try to compare them to people who are working double, triple overtime to people who work in part time over in this category is the wrong way to go about it. That's the cold hard reality. Now I know that this clip is probably going to be taken and going to be used to say, see, there's a red pillar over here that said this, this, and this. No, I'm not saying that. So if you see this clip somewhere where it's trying to be argued for a point, you know exactly where it came from. And I say, no, I'm not actually arguing that point. Because like I said, you would literally have to throw gay people under the bus to do so. And the sad part about that is, I would say nobody's stupid enough to do that. But then again, in this day and age, there's a lot of SJWs just stupid enough to do that. Which is a funny concept. But to get back on track, to say that you speak truth and your philosophy when you really don't, and you're borrowing from other people, and you're taking concepts that haven't really been scientifically proven or scientifically proven to be mainly women, you typically run into a problem with your actual philosophy at that point, or what you got to say. And yes, to answer your question, Shinobi, when he did DM me that. Um, the sad part about that, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you realize very quickly that all this is nothing more than something to make people feel better about themselves and make people want to capitulate to the fuckery for all intents and purposes. Um, and the sad part about that, at the end of the day, like I said, I would not put it past SJWs and feminists to do so. I mean, I just see it happening because I would say nobody's stupid enough to do it. But then again, if you're going off of today's how today's things work with linear and time, you can actually see them actually throwing gay people under the bus for this reason. Um, but to be honest about it, once you actually think about it fully, you'll understand that a lot of times it's not about the truth, It's about how it makes you feel and how it makes you. Because the sad part about that, this is typically how women work when it comes to feelings. It's all about how she actually feels at the moment in time. It's not the fact that it's the truth. It's the fact that it's addicting. And when you actually start saying stuff to people and making people feel a certain way, they get addicted to it. So it doesn't make it truth. It makes it a very addicting or very persuasive. Because at the end of the day, you can get a married woman to cheat on her husband if you press the right buttons. Hell, I've gotten married women to actually cheat on me with other married, cheat with me with other married women. At the end of the day, it is what it is. If you press the right buttons, you can get a woman to do anything you want her to do, for all intents and purposes. And that's pretty much what it all comes down to is feelings. There's really no truth. It's all about feelings. Your feelings become facts. Anything you feel will always become a fact to you. Just like a good example of that is we always talk about statistics. We talk about black people are statistically more likely to commit a crime against another black person. It's statistics. It's facts. It's statistics. It's for sure. However, if you actually take my life, you'll realize very quickly that I'm more likely to be victimized by a woman or a white guy than I am to be victimized by a black guy. Like, let that sink in. So it's one of those things where you take a data point and you actually add it to, and you find out very quickly, I'm a part of the data set, but I'm a part of a different portion of the data set. I'm a part of the data set where it says, white people are more likely to victimize white people. Well, there's that small percentage that I fall into where white people are more likely to victimize me. And the sad part about that, they always say, well, women don't victimize men. Then you come to find out Tico, according to life, has been victimized by a lot of women in his life for all intents and purposes, typically trying to rob me or do stupid shit to me or, paint me in a negative light to basically make me worse than what I really am. So this is typically why I don't trust white women for this reason, because white women typically were the very thing that always try to paint me in a bad light. So I don't trust white women for this reason, because statistically to me, white women is the worst thing in the world that can actually happen to me in life for all intents and purposes for this reason. Because you can't say, well, Tico, that's wrong. And when it comes to statistics, black people over here, well, if a black person never done anything wrong to me, and it's this white woman that's done everything wrong to me, the white women that's done everything wrong to me, you can't sit up here and argue that, that I'm wrong, when in fact, statistically, I'm right when it comes to my own life, because my data set is set on a different thing. So, in all technicality, what I'm saying is truth, even though you don't want to believe it. Like, anytime I've ever been robbed, most of the times when I've ever been robbed or victimized have been by white women. Granted, some of them have been hopped up on drugs when they tried to rob me, but, typically, anytime when somebody's attempted to rob me or attempted to take advantage of me, it's always been a white woman. Or try to paint me in a negative light, it's always been a white woman. The sad part about that is I've never had a black woman actually paint me in a negative light. In all technicality, I've never had a black woman try to throw me under the bus or try to accuse me of a crime that I didn't commit. So statistically, the worst people I could deal with is white women at the end of the day, in my life. Typically, I try to avoid them as much as humanly possible for this reason. Unless I got to work with them, then that's another story. But typically, I just don't date, nor do I trust them as far as I can throw them, based on my life and the path that they've taken to alter my life multiple times for all intents and purposes. So when it comes down to it, you have to understand why and how things actually work, or why and how things are what they are. when it comes down to it. Um, just because it's statistics and truth doesn't necessarily make it actual facts, because not everybody's going to experience what you actually experience. Not everybody's going to be in the same light. Not all people who don't look like, tens, nines, and tens are going to experience the same thing at the same rate as you. It's all about how you go about, making yourself marketable, or get make making yourself being able to bend or manipulate feelings around you and your surroundings. Because the sad part about that, at the end of the day, if you can manipulate your surroundings, you can actually make for a better outcome, no matter what it is across the board. And a lot of people don't seem to get this or understand that. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, any man can lead a woman astray. Any man can lead a woman both good or bad. All you have to do is tap into her feelings. A good example of that is, typically, if you want to tap into a woman's feelings or emotions, you basically start the conversation by saying, I feel as though, or I believe, or I believe strongly, or say, I believe strongly, stuff like that. Say things that actually have strong feelings in it, or make it sound like it's you have your conviction, but with feelings. Typically, you can get women to do a lot more shit by using feelings against them. Another good example of that is, like I said, with the whole entire, I believe wholeheartedly. No, use two words there. I believe wholeheartedly. So it's one of those things where, like, now you're invoking emotions at that person. It's typically why a lot of men in the manosphere get strikes on their channel when they actually sound angry when they say something, because you made a woman feel some type of way. So if you're angry in all of your videos while you're talking about women, typically women are going to feel some type of way, and they're going to levy strikes against you based on how they feel. You see how that works? So at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, just because just because you didn't mean it that way doesn't mean it's not that woman's reality, when in fact everything is based on feelings. This is typically why a lot of men in the manosphere can get strikes for no damn reason whatsoever under the sun, all because somebody felt some type of way. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's all about perception. That person's perception while watching your video made you threatening to them. And the sad part about that is, if you go back and watch the video and see where you got angry at, you realize very quickly that it's justifiable despite the fact that you disagree with it. If you actually go back and actually step outside yourself and actually look at that video, you can understand where it was justifiable for them to actually do so. It'd be no different than if you're at work and you have a suggestive photo on your phone. It could be misconstrued as harassment or sexual harassment, or things like that. Because at the end of the day, not everything is for everybody. Like, a good example, I had a female coworker who actually had like a chicken bondage on her phone screen. Now, typically, you would think somebody would complain about it. I have, like, if you ever see my phone screen, I basically have a skeleton holding a woman from behind by her breast. This woman has a woman in bondage, and her breast is actually exposed on her screen. Sad part about that is, apparently, due to the fact that a man's had a skeleton on it and it was grabbing her breast, it was more threatening than a woman who had the chicken bondage and leather straps with her breasts and pussy showing. Much more worse than what it was, much more worse than hers for all intents and purposes, based on perception and feelings. You see how that works? Just because I don't believe it's wrong doesn't necessarily mean just because I believe it's wrong doesn't necessarily mean it's not somebody's truth. Because at the end of the day, it's truth. It's her truth, her feelings, her belief, that makes it so that I'm wrong and she's not. And the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, I literally had to change my phone screen, but she never had to change her phone screen. Let that shit swirl around in your head. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's all about how people make you feel. It's all about it's all about how you paint your words and do your words to actually make people understand what you're going through. If you do it in an angrily light while you're doing it, people feel like you're being attacked. Typically, this is where most of your thumbs down actually come from. This is where most of your channel strikes come from as well too, because people felt threatened or people felt like you were attacking them or you were a threat to their life or society. Typically, is how it works. Because at the end of the day, no matter how strong women are, if a man's talking very roughly and very aggressively, either one or two things are going to happen. Either she's going to be turned on or she's going to feel threatened. That's typically the concept of society that people don't seem to get or understand once you boil it down. It is what it is. It's all about making people feel a certain way to get them to do what you need them to do, or making people feel a certain way so you can make it truth. Because at the end of the day, everything comes down to feelings. If you feel something, then obviously it's got to be true. If you if you feel hate, then obviously it's got to be true. If you feel as though you're being shamed, then obviously it's got to be true. That's typically how a lot of this stuff actually comes into play and becomes law or becomes like, the new norm and the new standards based on people's feelings. It's moved far beyond perception and straight into feelings, which is actually very sad. So a good example of that is, to argue a point, a good example of that is you're at a bar. You see this hot chick. She's into you. She's interested in you. She's sticking her tongue down her throat. She approaches you because she's into you. She actually starts sticking her tongue down your throat, and y'all go back to the hotel room and you bang her back out. Or you go back to your house or her house and you bang her back out. You don't call her for a few days. Because you didn't call her for a few days, now she feels as though she was used and abused. Now it's rape. You see how that works? You see how feeling actually progresses a lot of the shit that we do in society. Feeling progresses a lot of the shit and a lot of the problems that are how everybody actually feels. And when it comes down to it, you understand very quickly. No, perception is not stupidity. Perception is basically there to actually, it's almost like a sixth sense. When you feel danger or when you see something happen, your perception is there to actually protect you or help you understand what's going on in front of you, basically. Corey still. So your perception is basically there to make it so that it's believable. Or you understand what you're seeing or you're processing it properly. Is pretty much how perception actually works. Is basically a base mechanism to help you cope or understand the world for all intents and purposes. That's what pretty much perception is. Um, Feeling is where it starts getting convoluted because you feel a certain way, so it's got to be true. Like I was saying about the whole entire woman, she sleeps with a man. Because at the end of the day, what people fail to realize about women is when a woman has sex with a man, it actually validates her and she actually has a connection to that person at that moment in time. May it be temporary or long term, she actually created a connection with that person to actually have sex with that person. It's typically how it works. When you don't call her back, she starts feeling some type of way. When she starts feeling some type of way, her perception goes into overdrive. When her perception starts going into overdrive, her feelings go into overdrive. And when her feelings go into overdrive, accusations actually start. It's typically how that works. Because at the end of the day, what you have to realize is people don't seem to understand the whole entire concept behind how we go from a to 0 to 1 million in a matter of seconds. It's all about a female's perception. It's all about a female's perception and her emotions that actually make it so she can actually do the things she do, like flag your videos or accuse you of rape. Because at the end of the day, think of it like this. Imagine you going to sleep the night before. You don't remember the night before. You wake up the next day and you're next to a guy. You're both naked in bed. There's a condom wrap. There's a condom and a condom wrapper in the bed sheets. Now you don't know what happened. You don't remember what happened. How do you feel? It is what it is. You're going to feel exactly that. First off, you don't know what happened last night. You can't remember what happened last night. You're both naked in bed together, and there's a condom and condom wrapper in the bed sheets. At the end of the day, you have no clue what happened. But does that make it true that it actually happened? How do you know it's not a practical joke from your friends? How do you know that what happened didn't happen? And it's one of those things where you have to understand very quickly when it comes to perception and feelings. Women corner the market on perception and feelings. So anything you do or say to them makes them feel slighted, makes them feel wronged when it comes down to it. Even though you seen it as a one night stand, her perception behind it was totally different than yours. So you may have seen it one way, she's seen it another way, or you might have seen it that way and she's seen it the opposite way. At the end of the day, it's all about her own perception that makes it so that it's truth or reality. Yeah. And what No Sweetheart actually said is actually true. She feels used, hence the word she used. She feels used and abused. That's a loaded line. It has three loaded things in there at the same time. She feels feel used and abused. That's typically how it works. And this is typically how women can actually make that make that small step into a huge leap based on their feelings. Because to a woman, feelings is truth. Feelings is facts. Feelings is everything. This is typically why you have sensitivity training in workplaces. This is typically why you have things like, um, you have to be sensitive to other people and cultures around you. This is typically why that stuff actually exists. This is typically why HR passes down these things. And this is typically why HR is ran by women, because everything is about feelings and perception. If you make somebody feel a certain way, their feelings become facts within HR. And those facts become your downfall or your firing at the end of the day. That's typically how this actually works. Because when you feel a certain way, and somebody to get you to feel a certain way, you typically will believe it as truth because they got to make you they made you feel a certain way and they made you feel things with inside. So now that fact that you feel that way now is your way of projecting that what they're saying is truth because it resonated with you. Just because something resonates with you, that don't necessarily make it true. This is typically why I always speak out against groupthink and tell you you should go and do investigation yourself or do things to understand things better yourself. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, that feeling that you're portraying as truth is nothing more than feeling or perception. Your perception and your feeling, and your perceptions are based on your life experiences, how you grew up, your beliefs, and your morals, for all intents and purposes, make for your perception. And if you can actually, if feelings, your feelings basically justify your perception. When your feelings just start justifying your perception, that actually solidifies it and makes it truth. This is typically why a lot of people don't seem to understand how people can make the jump to certain things without a middle ground. The middle ground was basically their perception based on how they were raised culturally and everything about them and morally. It actually exists. Then they take their feelings, and if their feelings line up for their perception, it basically justifies their perception and solidifies it and makes it truth. If you know what I mean, if I didn't confuse a lot of people by saying that. So at the end of the day, you have to understand at the end of the day that everything is based on perception and feelings. And when you can actually get your perception and your feelings to line up, that makes it truth. Best said by him. Poor awareness, poor perception. Because at the end of the day, I can actually argue anything as facts and to evidence. Like I said, statistically, when it comes to me as a black person or an Afro Latino, I've been statistically done wrong by white women more than any other group of people on the face of this earth. It is what it is. Or another good example of that is because because I've been victimized by this group so much, I typically don't trust or date this group for this reason. Does it make it so that this does that mean all do I believe all people are bad in that group? My perception and my feelings say yeah. But does that make it true to you? Probably not. But because of my perception and my feelings, that's my truth now. And now I believe that because that's what I had to deal with. And that was pretty much my pillars in my life experiences that makes it so this is now my truth. Is it true that this happened to me? Yes. Is it wrong that it happened to me? Yes. Does it change the fact that it happens to me? No. It's one of those things, basically. Hmm. Yeah. Just think about that for a minute. Perception's also a coping mechanism. Your feelings are also a coping mechanism. How you perceive things and how you process the information is your mind coping with the situation that you're processing. The finished product is basically what your mind compiled, and how you actually feel to make it so that you can actually deal with or cope with the situation properly. A lot of people tend to back out or run away from dealing with the situation, and that's nothing more than a coping mechanism within itself. You're basically coping from the situation that your mind actually presented for you, and now you're coping from having to cope with it. So by not coping with it, you're actually coping again by not coping with it. So basically, you're running. It's sad. It's true, but it is what it is. Yeah. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, it is what it is. Corporate society will always preach that perception is reality, when in fact, perception is based on your own personal experiences from how you grew up in life. Good example of perception. A good example of that is take two people, one white guy, another white guy, a third white guy. We'll take one white guy from the city. We'll take one white guy from the suburbs. We'll take a white guy from the backwoods or the country, basically. Now, perception is key when it comes to this. Or we'll just take two people to make it less complicated. We'll take a kid from the suburbs, and we'll take a kid from the city. Now, typically, how people deal with noise is based on their environment and their surroundings. Good example of that is if a person from the suburb hears a noise, they tend to pique their interest and they go investigate it. If a person from the inner city hears a noise, they typically either run or they get down on the ground and play dead based on what the noise is. Like a good example, in the suburbs, if a person hears a gunshot, they naturally go out and look. Or if they hear a car backfire or something that sounds like a gunshot sound, they typically go out and look to see what's going on. In the inner city, if you hear something, a car backfire, you basically get on your stomach and face down in the grass, basically, or face down on the ground and play dead. That's the difference between the two perceptions, is the best way I can describe it to you. And like Baron Yam said, yeah, running is coping because now you're running from a problem and now you're coping. You're running from a problem that you originally had to, that your brain basically gave you to provide you to actually cope with the problem. Now you're running from coping with that problem by coping by running from that problem. If that doesn't sound too confusing. Billy to go. Who else wants ice cream? Great stream. Yummy. Yeah, we definitely will. I plan on going to Netherlands within the next 8 months. I plan on being in the Netherlands most definitely. 8, 9, maybe 10 months. Basically, I plan on being in the Netherlands. So we definitely are going to hook up and go drink some shit and get into some trouble most definitely. Um, I ran from society in the city. I'm coping. Well, yeah, you are. But the question is, did you run to better yourself, or are you running to avoid what you have to face? That's what you have to ask yourself, Shinobi One. Are you running? Did you run from it to better yourself, or did you run to avoid what you had to face? That's typically the difference between is between the two. Oh, both. Hmm. Interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm sorry to hear that. Is it working out better where you are now, Shinobi One? Or are you still running? Or are you still dealing with that whole entire coping thing? Gotcha. That's actually not coping. If that's why you dodge the city, that's actually bettering your chances of not getting sick and survivability too. Once you think about it, because if something's going to hit, it's going to hit the major cities first before it hits the country or the suburbs. Because usually how it goes is it hits the city, then it hits the suburbs, then if it gets lucky, it'll hit the country for all intents and purposes. That's pretty much how that works. Well, you want trouble? Welcome to East Harlem. I like that. Facing fear is also coping. Yes, everything is coping. Once you think about it, to a certain extent, facing your fears is coping with your fears. The sad part about that is, usually when you're ready to face your fears, it's a matter of, are you ready to face it, or you're going to run from it. It's typically how it works. Facts. Yeah, I've talked about that multiple times. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Yeah, that's actually very true. Alrighty then. Class dismissed. Gonna play my outro. Y'all be blessed.
Oh, snap.